Hello, everyone. It is Tuesday night, and that means it's book talk. And I am so excited because tonight I get to introduce you to a new writing friend of mine, Rachel Russell, who is writing with Susie May Warren on her Deep Haven series. And I have to tell you, I started reading this book a few days ago, and it is phenomenal. If you love Susie's books that are set up in Deep Haven, Minnesota, then you will absolutely adore Rachel's. And at the same time, if you just love a really great contemporary romance that feels like real life and just is so sweet and just really delightful. I mean, the hero and the heroine, and then there's a little boy, and they just all captured my heart and my attention from really the first time they were on the page. And so I highly recommend that you check out Still the One by Rachel Russell. But I want Rachel, I want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself because you're a debut author. You had 2 books come out in the last year. So can you tell readers a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, thank you for that very nice introduction. I, as you said, I've got my 2 books that came out this year. I was one of those people that always wanted to be a writer, but was super practical. So I pursued a degree and a career and did all the other things. And then several years back, I was actually doing a questionnaire, like a kind of a goal setting type questionnaire. And it said, if you could be doing anything, what would it be doing? And my absolute knee jerk immediate response was writing. And I dabbled a little bit over the years. I'd written some poetry, really, fun poetry and some sappy poetry and some short stories, but I'd really had it on the back burner. So then it was the next question was, what are you doing to move towards that goal? At the time, there was really nothing I was doing. I was working and raising kids and spending my days on the sidelines of soccer in the pouring rain. And so that's when I really started pursuing my writing and kind of delving into learning the craft, because while I'd always loved writing, I had taken some creative writing classes. I'd never really studied story structure as a professional writer would and should. So that was kind of the beginning of it. And that was probably 2015, 2016 is when I really started getting involved, and I found my book therapy and started joining the Novel Academy pep talks and Oregon Christian writers conferences and workshops, and just have continued to try to pursue improving and honing that craft.
So when we talk as writers, we'll say things like, DPOV and writing craft. But what is one thing that when you first started exploring, chasing this dream of writing, and you walked into a writers conference or a novel therapy event and you went, I have no idea what you're talking about? Because like for me, I'll never forget walking in to the American Christian Fiction Writers Indiana chapter at Colleen Coeble's house, and people were talking about POV. And I was like, I don't have a clue what you're talking about, because we kind of have our own language. So
Right.
What was one of those for you?
Well, similarly, the concept of like head hopping.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It was like head hopping. What does that mean? And the concept of deep third person POV, I'd never thought about that or understood what some of that meant. So yeah. And I'd read books that were guilty of the head hopping. So once I understood it, I was like, oh, I see where that's a problem, because you can't be in 2 heads at once.
Yeah.
But before that, it was like, there was, for a while, it was really popular to have kind of that omniscient third point of view. And so really transitioning to understanding, okay, in this scene, I am only in this person's head. I can only know what they know and feel what they feel.
And that is one of those things that as a reader, when we see head hopping, we go, hey, I just kind of got tugged out of the story a little bit. What's going on? But we don't really stop and go, oh, so I am now moved into this character's head, and the person who was talking couldn't know that. And so we get into this space that then if you're starting to write and you love reading, some of those things that you may not know the technical term for, as soon as you learn it, you can be like, oh, now I understand why that didn't work for me, but the drilling it down and applying it can be a challenge. So tell us about the story of how you got to Still the One and writing with Susie Warren on her Deep Haven series.
So let's see, in late summer of 2019, Susie announced this new company, this new publishing company that had a really unique concept where it would pair established authors with new to market authors, ideally. So basically as part both mentoring as well as the kind of the name recognition to help these new authors find an audience by matching them up with these existing audiences of authors who have followings. And so the parameters were submitting writing samples, and there's a questionnaire and your premise for what you wanted to write in. Susie was the inaugural year first season author, so it was in her Deep Haven world. And so I dove in. She's one of my favorite authors. I knew the stories. I knew Deep Haven, loved Deep Haven. And so I just poured myself into this, tweaked my writing submission, and it's a blind submission. So when they get the packets, all the identifying information is stripped away. So because Susie does know, she knows a lot of her students, she knows a lot of upcoming authors. So in order to have it be really unbiased and strictly based on voice and writing and skill and matching up, because really part of this too is you can have two equally great authors, but the voice of one might be suited better to a different author's following. Yeah. And so Susie has her specific voice, so matching both the skill with voices that would kind of resonate with her readers. And so I did my submission in fall of 2019, and then got notification that I was a finalist. So then I had to actually write the first scene of this proposed novel in Deep Haven. And then I waited. And it was really funny in hindsight. I don't know what I was thinking, but I had in my head that I would get a call, that they would be phoning the people that they had selected. So when I got an email, I didn't open it right away. I just was like, oh God, okay. Because I've been telling God, whatever is your plan for me, I understand, I'll be okay with it. But this feels like a really good plan for me, but I'll be okay with it, God.
I love that.
So I didn't open it, and I'm kind of pacing around. My husband was at work. One of my boys was sitting on the couch. I think he was actually napping at the time. And I opened it and I'm reading it. I'm like, oh, wow, bless her heart. This is the nicest rejection I've ever received. I'm reading it. Then I get to the bottom and it says, we look forward to working with you. And I was like, what?
Wait, now I've got to reread it because it's not what I thought.
I know. And it's like the gears are really slow clicking to because I was so, tunnel vision. I knew what this said. And then I've got the tears. I'm like, and my son wakes up and he's like, wow. And I'm just like, ah.
Yeah.
So he comes over and hugs me and he's like,
awesome.
I knew you could do it, Mom. So that was the beginning. And then of course it was, now I have to deliver on these novels that, then I went through how am I going to write a novel? Little me in Susan McWarren's world. I mean, what was super exciting is now super scary, but she's been amazing to work with. Of course, she's an incredible teacher, amazing mentor. So we brainstormed together, me and the other two authors, and Susie, and I wrote the book.
That's awesome. So what are some of the challenges? And I come at this from having written a bunch of books for Guideposts. I think I wrote 10 or 12 for Guideposts, where it was in their Cozy Mystery series, which are similar, only it's a group of authors that there's a book coming out every month. So it's a really tight turnaround and you're all writing in the same world. So it's different to have to kind of coordinate. So what were some of the challenges that maybe made it a really neat experience, but also we're like, wow, how am I going to handle that?
Right. So Michelle Alexson and Andrea Christensen are the excuse me, the other two authors. In fact, Andrea's book, which is book, let's see, 5 in this series, just released today. So Hanging by a Moment is now out there and available. But we all, we all brainstormed together, and we had this thread that goes throughout all 6 novels. And then we're writing at the same time, but our books rely on each other. So it was a real bonding experience for us. We were texting each other multiple times a day. Some of it was like you leave a big, like, all caps, enter detail here, because you don't know, because the author hasn't written yet what that thing's going to be that'll have to go there. And
so are they at the same time, or are they like
they're
a month
consecutive? So
Okay.
the second book, Can't Buy Me Love, starts right as Still the One ends, and then follows with Crazy for You, and then Came You, and then Hanging by a Moment. And so we just have this chronological order that passes through almost a year's time. And our characters are still being built. I mean, the apartment, it was like, we got to draw out this, figure out, because as characters are moving through these rooms, you got to know what they look like, and they exist in our head. So trying to convey that to these other authors and vice versa, it was a huge challenge. And while stressful, it was also one of those things that really really bonded us, and also helped us realize, giving grace and flexing, and not holding anything too tightly, because you might find out that this one thing you really wanted to have makes this other thing in a different book not work. So you got to be able to really work together well. And they've been amazing to work with.
Oh, that's awesome, because that is one of the challenges when you've got multiple authors writing at the same time. And it's different from when you're writing a series that you control all of it. And you're going to go from writing one book straight to writing the next one to writing the next one, because you still control the details. And versus you're all writing at the same time and all writing the same characters in the same place. And so I just got done with a novella collection that comes out October 1st, where it's 4 of us, we created a town, and there's some interaction between our stories. And so that same idea of, you just have to be able to go, okay, Pepper, does this fit with what your character would say? Or, hey, can you send me the description of this? Because, it's your heroine's location. So what do I need to know? And I'm always the one pushing for, okay, I want the drawing of the town. I want the, layout, so I know exactly how to see it all. And I think sometimes readers don't care as much as we do, but at the same time, if you get it wrong, let you know. So, and so you guys were working together, you're writing these books together. It's a 6-book series. You had your 2. So what are you working on next?
I'm actually working on, Sunrise offered another contract. So there will be an extended Deep Haven collection that it won't release till 2023. And
congratulations.
Thank you. I'm pretty excited. It's going to, again, be chronological time. So it'll start in winter and finish in summer, since it's only the 3 books. And Andrea Christensen was gracious enough to swap spots with me. So I will have the second book, because not living in Minnesota makes it really hard to write winter in Minnesota.
That's so true, because it is,
super hard.
No, but you have winter in Still the One.
I do. And that was such a I was literally like on the phone, like, can you read this? Is this cold enough? And one of the funny things about that was Susie's notes was like, okay, something you have to know is women in Minnesota don't go anywhere without gloves in winter. You got to give Megan some gloves.
So that's so funny.
Things like that. And like figuring out, okay, how long can somebody be outside, and what kind of temperatures, and what are we talking about? And their seasons can, they can get snow early in fall, and they can last, or they can have these weird warm days. And so trying to find that balance point. So my third novel will be a spring novel, which I really needed to, because my character is an outdoor person, and the story is taking place outside. I get to bring, I'm really excited about this, because I am avid horse girl, and I get to bring a cowboy to Deep Haven. So I'm super excited
Oh,
about that.
that'll be fun.
It's super fun. And having horses in that part of Minnesota is I didn't see a lot of them on our trip, I have to say. So, but there is a camp. And so
Awesome.
I don't want to give away too much, but there is a horse camp, and this cowboy will be participating. Have to make some choices about the camp, and the heroine appears in Then Came You.
Okay.
So readers will
Oh,
get to meet
fun.
her. And
Yes. I love that as a reader. When someone who's, a supporting or a secondary character, I'm like, oh, I wonder what their story is. And then you just kind of keep reading. And then they show up and they get their own
right.
book. And so it's fun because Trisha Goyer just popped in, and she and I have worked together on several different books. We actually wrote together with Guidepost, but she's been one of my writing friends for forever. And I know she's doing the Amish series with
Mhm.
Sunrise Publishing. And Susie Oakley was talking about in the comments all about, Jan Karen and the Mitford books, and how there's, that great sense of location and everything. So it sounds like you went to Minnesota and actually checked it out. And so what was one of the things that surprised you, that maybe you had a preconception that Minnesota would be just like where you're from, and then you got there and you're like, oh my word, this
Well, it
is
was
so different.
so I got to go to the town that Deep Haven's based on. And
Oh,
it was
fun.
like the greatest. It was the road trip, girls' road trip. Susie as at the helm, and Andrea and Michelle and I. And we did this marathon 1-day road trip in June. And it was such a blast. And we were plotting a novella the entire way there. And so that was fun. And then we get there, and it was really interesting because, I had it in my head, the vision, and just for research, I'd Google walked the streets. I used the
Oh
Street
yeah.
View, and I'd walked around town.
Yep.
But seeing
That
it
is
all
one of
in
the best features on Google, but you can't
yes,
rely on it. But it's great for giving you kind of a feel.
super handy, super handy. So it was really interesting though, because a lot of our towns here have like kind of the downtown areas, kind of like the old West storefronts you think of. And I'm in Oregon. And so I had in my head kind of a vision of that, which isn't what it's like there. And the lake was really interesting to me too, because we have our, Pacific Ocean here. And so having this freshwater lake that doesn't have the type of tides and waves coming in, and yet it by appearances looks like just it goes on forever. That was really interesting and fascinating to me.
That's so fun.
It was
Well,
super fun.
and I got to say, one of the things that I almost had to read the scene twice, because Meg's little boy in Still the One is playing hockey, and it's the middle of winter. There's snow everywhere. And it sounds like they're playing hockey outside because the
Yes.
moms are in a warming hut. And I was like, what? That's insane. And yet those are the kinds of details that get us so deeply embedded into the setting, because you wouldn't do that in Indiana. It would be an
Right.
indoor ice rink.
Right. Yes, it's a very hardy kind of world
Yeah.
that they pride themselves in, for sure.
And it's just crazy, so crazy. So what you've got lots going on. You've got a full-time job, you've got a family, you write. How do you balance it all?
When I wrote these novels, I did not feel like I was balancing it well at all. I was in
Welcome to
survival
writing.
mode. I was truly in survival mode. And it was really new to be writing on a deadline. I mean, I'd written
Yes.
like freelance articles on a deadline, but that's like the deadline's in 48 hours, and you just dump you just research, write,
Yeah.
and turn it in, and then you have a reprieve. So I had to really navigate some rough waters. And I'm hoping you have some good tips on that, because I know you balance quite a
Yeah.
bit of things.
Well, and it's one of those things where And Trisha's phenomenal at this as well. But that's one of the things we've often talked about is, for a long time, I was homeschooling and writing and teaching and all of that. And I think what you really learn when you're in that space, now I teach full time, which, is more than 40 hours a week, plus the active family, you just learn to grab every moment. And I thought it would get easier when my kids were teenagers. And then I realized, no, actually it didn't, because their idea, they come alive and when they want to talk is 11 o'clock at night, which was my writing time.
Oh, right.
And so, that was just, I had to kind of go, well, I'm going to value my relationship with my kids, and then I'm just going to trust God to help me expand the time. But it can be a challenge. And I think Trisha gets up at like 4 a.m, which to me, those hours do not exist. They're supposed to be, my eyelids are closed and I'm sleeping. And so for me, it was easier to stay up later, but really learning to capture every moment. And then my last probably 7 or 8 books I've written on thequill.io, because it allows me to write from any computer as long as I have an internet. So I didn't have to lug my writing laptop along. I can be at my day job and have a half-hour break, lunch or whatever, and I can write half a chapter because everything I need is right there online and in the program. And so finding some tools like that has been really helpful, but it's a challenge. So have you learned anything from your first 2 books that you're going to take into this next book?
Yeah. Taking breaks. I didn't take breaks. I was like, I plowed through, and really the deadline ruled my world.
Yeah.
So I'm still, finding that balance point and trying to find, okay, trusting too, because I do a lot of writing, rewriting in my head and overthinking instead of just laying it down. It's just part of my nature. So really working on letting it be ugly when I write it, and kind of trying to stick into blocks of time so that I understand, and trusting God that, okay, if I spend these 2 hours writing and then give my family the next 2 hours, that's okay, that ultimately it'll all work its way out. The story will get written, and I will be I'll be a better human for it. That I can be present, I can take a vacation, and I can write, and I can work my day job. I can do all those things and give them each their own time. That's how I'm trying to approach this. I haven't quite gotten it fine-tuned yet, though.
Well, and it's one of the things that I didn't do really well in my first few books, because I was just like, I'm enough of a perfectionist. I'm going to hit a deadline, because if you give it to me, there's a reason it's called a deadline, because I'm dead if I cross the line. And one of the things I learned to do was to back in and be realistic. If I have a book due January 15th, I'm going to want to take a week off around Christmas. I might need to do some writing, but I don't want to be writing 8 hours a day. And same thing around Thanksgiving. I want to take Thanksgiving off, and maybe I'll write a couple hours on the 26th or whatever the day after Thanksgiving is. And then being realistic and backing into, okay, so this is how many days I have. So this is how many words I have to write each day that I'm going to write, while giving myself grace for there's life. I wrote a lot of chapters at gymnastics meets and at swim meets. And, you kind of learn. And I would make it a competition with the girls who were competing. I'd be like, okay, how many words do you think I can get done while you're competing? And they know I'm there and I'm cheering, and they'll ask, they would ask my daughters, is your mom here? I can't hear her, kind of thing. But just learning to capture those times and go, okay, this is my deadline, and this is what I know I have to do each day, while being realistic. And Rel is saying, love your journey, which it is. It's so fun. It's always fun to hear, everybody's writing journey is just different. And so it's always inspiring. So you're writing these books and you're using other people's characters. That's such a fun and challenging thing. So tell us about Boone and how you pulled him in to the books that you're writing.
I have Boone's story right here.
Yeah.
So Boone was, he's in a character in Susan May Warren's PJ Sugar series.
I loved that series. So fun.
Too. But I was so brokenhearted for him. So
Yeah.
Boone was the character that I just couldn't forget. And so I had read it and I was just like, oh, even though it was right for those stories, I still was like, oh, but poor Boone.
Yeah.
And I'd actually, Susie was teaching at Oregon Christian Writers, and I had a mentor meeting with her because I'd signed up for her workshop. And one of the questions I asked her actually when I met her was, are you ever going to write Boone's story? And she was like, oh, well, that ship's kind of sailed, because she plans out her novels like years in advance. She knows what she's going to be writing 3 years from now.
She's amazing,
Incredible.
intimidating, and amazing.
It is intimidating. So I was like, okay,
Yeah.
Boone will never get a story. So then as when I was selected for Sunrise and we had our first phone call, she says, well, start thinking about what your second book in this Deep Haven series will be. And I said, oh, can I? Oh, okay. Well, hey, would you ever consider possibly maybe letting me write Boone's story? Could we bring him to Deep Haven? And she's so incredibly gracious. I mean, because here I am like asking for this amazing character she created. Can I tell his story? And she's like, I would love that. That's a great idea.
Oh,
So
that's awesome.
it was
Yeah.
incredible. So then it was like, and then I went from all the thrill and excitement that Boone gets a story to, oh, wow, I have to write Boone's story.
That's always the second part. It's like you get the permission and
what
you
have
go,
I done?
oh, wait, now I actually have to come up with the ideas.
Right.
And I've had that with books where I was like, I can't wait to write this book and I can't wait to write these character stories. And then it's like time. And I can only imagine and bringing him to life where you're like, I've wanted to know his story for forever, but oh, darn, now I have to actually tell it.
I have to tell it. So
how did you figure out what his backstory was?
He's a character in PJ Sugar's series, but we never were in his head.
Yeah.
The entire series is from her POV. So I have both hard copies and Kindle of these stories. So I went through my Kindle and I highlighted everything she says or infers about Boone. And I don't even know how many pages, it was a lot. And then I printed that.
That's
and
awesome.
I carried that around with me and then, reverse engineered his DMS, his Dark Moments story, which is a technique Susie teaches in how to create these characters from the inside out.
And it's brilliant.
It is brilliant. And, just teasing out all the pieces of him and then the people in his life, his father and his mother played part of that story that you see from the PJ Sugar side of things. There's some undercurrents there. So tease those things out and then, molded the man to be as true to who he was in as she created him as I possibly could without being, able to be in her head.
Yeah.
And
oh, that's
and,
so fun.
Had her blessing. Of course, she went through, as we discussed and brainstormed, she helped, fine tune and tweak some of those choices being made about his character. But yeah, it was super fun. And actually, the heroine in that novel, Vivian, was also a character that pre-existed in Susie's novels. So I had to similarly do the same thing with her.
Engineer.
Yes.
Okay, so I have to ask Rachel, is it intimidating to know that Susie's watching?
She is such a great friend that it's such a privilege and honor to work with her, to call her friend. I still remember one time at the Oregon Christian Writers Conference, after I first had met her, and we'd seen each other online on the Thursday night pep talks, but I was still so intimidated by her that when she introduced me as her friend to Jim Rubart's wife, I was like, oh, I'm just a student. I was like totally like, put me in the corner. I'm a nobody.
awesome. But that's one of the things I love about Susie. She gives so much, and she's a phenomenal writing teacher. And so I don't care how many books I've written, I always go back to her story equation and layer all those things in, because that's how I can reverse engineer and kind of figure out, okay, what's driving the character. And it's such a great process. So any of you who are watching or listening are aspiring writers, you really do need to check out Susie Warren's teaching, because it's phenomenal. She breaks it down, the craft, in such a way that it's easy to understand. It's not easy to do, because it takes a lot of work to craft a story that's going to emotionally engage readers so that they have to know what's next. And they are so vested that, 5 years later, they're like, can I please write Boone's story? But if you are wanting to be a writer, then Susie is definitely someone that you need to be following and learning from. So I know this is going to be hard to believe, but we are at the end of our half hour.
You could talk about books really all night long.
Yeah. And so, and Trisha says she's learning tons from Susie this week, because Trisha Goyer is the lead author for a series that Susie Sunrise Publishing is putting out on Amish. And so Trisha and I actually wrote Amish together, which I would have said I never was going to write Amish, which I have learned, never tell God never, because what he does is he immediately turns around and says, really? But it gave me a great excuse to write with Trisha, which was just a blast. So thank you so much for joining us. I have loved getting to know you. This has been so much fun, and I cannot recommend her books enough. They are just delightful and wonderful contemporary romance that, if you love Susie's book, Set Up in Deep Haven, you will adore Rachel's books. But at the same time, if you've never read Susie's books, you need to read Rachel's, and then you'll want to go back and read all of Susie's, because they're just such fun, rich, really layered with, you get to know the characters in such a deep way, because they just keep appearing over the books. So thank you so much for joining me tonight, Rachel. This has been so much fun.
Thank you. It's been fun for me too. It's an honor to be here.
And for those of you who like to tune in for Book Talk, next week is Liz Johnson. And then the last week in September is Jamie Jo Wright. So we've got some more great interviews coming up. And thanks so much for joining us tonight.